The cantina on Nexus Prime was dark and smoky. Strange aliens from across the galaxy sat at small tables drinking and talking quietly. The air smelled of exotic foods and strong alcohol. In the corner, far from the main crowd, sat an old HFY warrior. Vexthil Morvac had 4 arms, all covered in scars from old battles. His compound eyes moved slowly across the room, watching everything. He had been coming to this cantina for years, always sitting alone, always drinking the same strong whiskey. A young HFY female walked toward his table. She carried a small recording device and looked nervous. Her name was Zilandra, and she worked as a journalist for the Galactic News Network. She had been looking for Vexthil for months. "Excuse me," she said, stopping near his table. "Are you Vexthil Morvac, the veteran from the Human War?" Vexthil looked up at her with his many eyes. He did not smile. "Who wants to know?" "My name is Zilandra. I work for the news. I want to record your stories about the war. The people need to know what really happened 20 years ago." Vexthil made a sound that might have been a laugh. It was not a happy sound. The people think they want to know, but they do not. Some stories are too dangerous to tell. Zilandra sat down without being asked. "Please, the war changed everything. Our people lost, but no one talks about why. They just say the humans were lucky." "Lucky?" Vexthil's eyes focused on her. "Child, luck had nothing to do with it. The humans won because they are something we never understood, something we still do not understand." He lifted his glass of whiskey and drank it all at once. Then he called for another one. The bar was getting louder as more aliens came in for the evening. "I have been trying to forget these stories for 20 years, Vexthil said, "but they stay in my mind like poison. Maybe it is time to let them out." Zilandra turned on her recording device. "Tell me about the humans. What made them so different?" Vexthil stared into his new glass of whiskey. "We thought we knew about war. Our people had conquered 12 worlds before we met the humans. We had the best weapons, the best ships, the best tactics. We moved like one mind, perfectly coordinated. We were the perfect warriors." He paused and took another drink. "Then we met them on Kepler 442b. It was supposed to be an easy victory. One small human colony, maybe 1,000 people. We sent 5,000 soldiers. It should have been over in one day." At another table, a human freighter captain named Jake Morrison was eating his dinner. He did not know that the old alien was talking about his people. He was just a simple trader who moved goods between planets. "The battle started at dawn," Vexthil continued. "Our ships landed and our soldiers marched toward the human settlement. We expected them to surrender when they saw how many of us there were. Humans were supposed to be weak, afraid of death." Zilandra leaned forward. "What happened?" "They did not surrender. Instead, 30 human soldiers came out to meet us." "Just 30? Our commander laughed and ordered the attack. He thought it would be easy." Vexthil's voice became quieter. "Those 30 humans held us for 3 days. 3 days without sleep, without food, without help coming. We had more soldiers, better weapons, air support. But they would not give up." "How is that possible?" Zilandra asked. "That is what we could not understand. When our soldiers got tired, they became weaker. When they got hungry, they could not fight as well. When things looked bad, some of them would run away. But the humans became stronger when things got bad." Vexthil remembered the face of the human leader, a woman named Amy Chen. She had been wounded 3 times, but she kept fighting. When her weapon broke, she picked up rocks. When the rocks ran out, she used her hands. On the second day, we surrounded them completely. They had no escape. Our commander sent a message asking them to surrender. The human leader just laughed and said something in their language. Later, we learned what it meant. What did she say? She said, "You are not stuck in here with us. We are not stuck in here with you. We are all stuck in here together, and we are very good at being stuck." Vexthil finished his second drink and called for a third. The third day was the worst. We had lost almost 1,000 soldiers trying to take that small position. Our weapons were running low. Our commander was getting angry calls from his superiors asking why 30 humans were holding up 5,000 HFY warriors. "Did you finally win?" "We retreated." Zilandra stared at him. "You retreated? From 30 humans?" 23 humans. 7 had died by then. But the 23 who were left were still fighting like demons. Our commander decided it was not worth losing any more soldiers. "We pulled back and bombed the position from orbit. So you did win in the end." Vexthil's compound eyes looked sad. We destroyed the buildings, but when we went back to check, we found tunnels. The humans had dug escape tunnels while they were fighting us. They had saved their wounded and most of their people. We had accomplished nothing except proving that humans do not know how to quit. Jake Morrison finished his meal and stood up to leave. As he walked past their table, he nodded politely to Vexthul and Zelandra. "Good evening," he said with a smile. After he left, Vexthul watched him go. 20 years later, and they still smile at us, even after everything that happened in the war. That might be the most terrifying thing about them. Zelandra looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You asked me to tell you about the humans. That story from Kepler 442b was just the beginning. I have 4 more stories, each one worse than the last. Each one showing you something about humans that will make you understand why we lost the war. Tell me more." Vexthul signaled for another drink. The next story happened on Theta Cygni. It was a jungle world where we thought we had the advantage. We were wrong. Very wrong. But before I tell you that story, you need to understand something important. What? The humans in these stories were not special soldiers or heroes. They were just regular humans doing what humans do. That is what made them so dangerous. Every human is a potential nightmare if you push them too far. The cantina was getting more crowded, but their corner remained quiet. Zelandra checked her recording device to make sure it was still working. "Are you ready for the second story?" Vexthul asked. "Yes," she said, though she was not sure she really was. Vexthul smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Good. Because once you hear these stories, you will understand why the galaxy is a safer place with humans as our friends instead of our enemies." Vexthul took a long drink of his whiskey and looked around the cantina. The crowd was getting louder, but he seemed lost in his memories. Zelandra waited patiently for him to continue. "Theta Cygni," he said finally. "It was our biggest mistake of the war. We thought we understood jungle warfare. Our people had evolved in forest environments. We could see in the dark, move quietly through thick plants, and our natural camouflage made us nearly invisible." He paused and shook his head slowly. "The humans taught us that there is a difference between living in a forest and hunting in one." Zelandra adjusted her recording device. "What happened there?" "We had taken the planet easily. 50,000 Kethvar soldiers against maybe 2,000 human colonists. Most of the humans evacuated when our ships arrived. We thought the few who stayed behind would hide in the cities or surrender quickly." Vexthul's forearms moved as he talked, gesturing at memories only he could see. Instead, they disappeared into the jungle. Our commanders were not worried. How could 2,000 humans hide from 50,000 trained soldiers? We had sensors, aircraft, and perfect coordination between our units. But something went wrong. Everything went wrong. The first sign of trouble came on the second day. A patrol of 20 soldiers went missing. We found their camp the next morning, but they were gone. No signs of a fight, no bodies, no blood. Just empty tents and cold cooking fires. Vexthul remembered the fear in his fellow soldiers' eyes when they found that empty camp. The Kethvar were used to clear battles with obvious winners and losers. This was something different. Our commanders sent out search parties. They found strange things. Kethvar equipment arranged in perfect circles. Our own communication devices left in trees playing human music very quietly. Messages written in our language that said things like, "We see you," and "You are being watched." Psychological warfare, Zelandra said. We had no word for it then. Our people do not think that way. When we fight with weapons and tactics. The humans were fighting with our minds. Vexthul ordered another drink. His hands were starting to shake slightly as he remembered. The disappearances continued. Every day another patrol would vanish. Sometimes we would find their equipment. Sometimes we would find nothing at all. Our soldiers started to get nervous. They jumped at every sound in the jungle. How many humans were doing this? That was the terrifying part. We thought it was a large force, maybe several hundred special soldiers. Our intelligence teams worked day and night trying to figure out how many enemies we were facing. Vexthul laughed, but it was a bitter sound. We were being terrorized by 37 humans. 37, led by a female named Amy Chen and a male named Ben Torres. They were not even special forces. Chen was a regular Marine officer and Torres was an engineer who had volunteered to stay behind. 37 humans against 50,000 Kethvar? Yes, and they were winning. After 2 weeks, our soldiers were afraid to leave the main base camps. We had to send patrols out in groups of 100 just to feel safe. Even then, sometimes those patrols would come back missing soldiers. Vexthul could still remember the night sounds of the jungle. Every bird call, every insect noise, every rustling leaf could have been a human. The stress had driven some of his fellow soldiers to breakdown. The humans used our own strengths against us. We could see in the dark, so they filled the jungle with tiny lights that confused our vision. We could hear very well, so they used sound makers that mimicked our communication signals. We moved in coordinated groups, so they learned our patterns and set traps. What kind of traps? Simple ones, but effective. Pits covered with leaves, tripwires connected to falling logs, our own explosive, stolen from our camps and moved to new locations. But the worst traps were not physical. Zilandra leaned closer. What do you mean? They would leave messages for specific soldiers, using information they could not possibly know. A message for Private Kolvar about his mate back home. A note for Sergeant Vixtul about his favorite food. They had somehow learned personal details about our soldiers and used them to prove they were watching us all the time. Vexthul remembered finding a message with his own name on it. It had been left on his pillow while he slept, right in the middle of the most secure base camp. The message just said, "Sweet dreams, Vexthul." He had not slept well for the rest of the campaign. How did they get that information? We never found out. Maybe they captured soldiers and questioned them. Maybe they had technology we did not understand. Maybe they were just very good at watching and listening. The not knowing was part of the psychological attack. What happened next? Our commander, Colonel Vexthak, decided to end the game. He ordered a massive sweep of the entire jungle. Every soldier on the planet moving in a coordinated search pattern. We would find the humans and finish them quickly. Vexthul finished his drink and immediately ordered another. The sweep lasted 3 days. We found nothing. No humans, no camps, no equipment. It was like they had never existed. Our commander was furious. He was getting pressure from high command to explain why we could not control one small planet. Did you ever find them? Oh yes, on the last day of the sweep we found them. All 37 humans sitting around a campfire in the middle of our main base camp. They had somehow gotten through all our security while we were out looking for them in the jungle. Zilandra's eyes widened. They were in your base? Drinking our coffee and eating our food? When our commander arrived, the human leader, Amy Chen, stood up and saluted politely. She said, "Colonel, we would like to discuss terms for the evacuation of the remaining civilian population. What did your commander do?" He was so shocked he could not speak for almost a full minute. Here were the humans who had been terrorizing his army for weeks, sitting calmly in his own headquarters. Chen explained that they had been living in the base for several days, moving through maintenance tunnels and unused buildings. Vexthul could still see the look on Colonel Vexthak's face. The mixture of anger, confusion, and grudging respect had been almost comical. Chen made a deal with our commander. The humans would stop their guerrilla campaign if we allowed the remaining civilian population to evacuate safely. She pointed out that we had already spent more resources fighting 37 humans than it would cost to just let a few thousand civilians leave. Did the colonel agree? He wanted to refuse, but his superiors were demanding results. The campaign was becoming embarrassing. High Command wanted to move those 50,000 soldiers to other battles where they might actually accomplish something useful. So the humans won. They got what they wanted. The civilians evacuated safely, and the 37 fighters disappeared back into the jungle. We kept control of the planet, but everyone knew who had really won that campaign. Vexthul stared into his glass, but that was not the worst part. The worst part came later. When we analyzed what had happened, our intelligence teams tried to figure out how 37 humans had outmaneuvered 50,000 Kethvar soldiers. What did they learn? The humans had been tracking us the entire time. They knew where every patrol was going before the patrol leaders did. They had copied our communication codes and listened to all our radio traffic. They had maps of our base camps that were more accurate than our own maps. How is that possible? Humans are persistence hunters. On their homeworld, they evolved to track prey for days or weeks until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They can follow tracks that other species cannot even see. They can predict where their target will go next based on tiny clues. They can wait motionless for hours or days for the perfect moment to strike. Vexthul looked directly at Zilandra with all of his compound eyes. We were not fighting soldiers on Theta Cygni. We were being hunted by predators who had turned warfare into an art form. Every mistake we made gave them more information. Every pattern we followed became a weakness they could exploit. That is terrifying. Yes, it is. But that story is not even the worst one. The third story is about what happens when you corner humans and they have nothing left to lose. That is when they become truly dangerous. Zilandra checked her recording device again. How much worse can it get? Vexthal smiled that cold, unhappy smile again. Child, you have no idea what humans are capable of when they are desperate. The next story will show you why our people learn to fear wounded humans more than healthy ones. Vexthal sat quietly for a long time, staring at his drink. The cantina around them continued to buzz with conversation, but their corner felt isolated from the rest of the galaxy. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, more haunted. Proxima Station, he said. That is where I learned that wounded humans are more dangerous than healthy ones. Zilandra noticed that his 4 hands were gripping his glass tightly. What happened there? It was near the end of the war. We had cornered a group of humans in an abandoned mining facility. 23 human soldiers, but most of them were badly wounded. Our intelligence said they had no food, no medical supplies, and no way to escape. It should have been a simple capture operation. Vexthal took a small sip of his whiskey. I was part of the assault team. 200 Kethavar soldiers against 23 wounded humans in a building with no exits. Our commander told us it would be over in minutes, but it was not. We breached the main entrance at dawn. The first thing we noticed was the smell. Blood, sweat, and something else. Something that made our survival instincts scream warnings. The building was too quiet. Vexthal remembered walking through those dark corridors, his weapon ready, expecting to find defeated humans waiting to surrender. Instead, they found something much worse. The humans had turned the mining facility into a fortress, but not a normal fortress. They had used mining equipment, scrap metal, and their own blood to create defenses that were designed to terrify as much as to kill. Their own blood? They had painted warnings on the walls in human blood, messages in our language that said things like "turn back" and "you do not want to be here." But the worst message was painted above the main corridor. It said, "Welcome to hell. Population 23 and counting." Zilandra felt a chill run through her body. They were trying to scare you? It was working. My squad leader, a veteran of 12 battles, stopped at that message and said we should call for reinforcements, but our commander ordered us to continue. Vexthal could still see those blood-painted words clearly in his memory. The human handwriting had been shaky, probably written by someone who was badly injured, but the message was clear. We found the first human in what used to be the cafeteria, a female named Lisa Park. She was performing surgery on a wounded soldier using tools she had made from mining equipment. When we entered the room, she looked up at us and said, "You will have to wait your turn. This patient comes first." She was operating during a battle. She continued the surgery while we pointed weapons at her. Her hands never shook. She removed shrapnel from the wounded soldier's chest, stitched up the wound with wire she had sterilized in a fire, and bandaged it with cloth torn from her own uniform. Only then did she look at us again. Vexthal remembered the look in Lisa Park's eyes. Not fear, not anger, just cold determination. She had been covered in blood, both her own and her patient's. But she worked with the steady hands of someone who refused to let death win. Our squad leader ordered her to surrender. Park stood up slowly. She was wounded in 3 places, bleeding from a head injury, and had obviously not slept in days. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. What did she say? She said, "I have 19 more patients to treat. You can either shoot me now or wait until I am finished. But I am not stopping." Then she moved to the next wounded soldier and began cleaning his wounds. "Did you shoot her?" Our squad leader tried to grab her to stop the treatment. That is when we learned about human protective instincts. Vexthal paused to take another drink. His hands were shaking more now as he remembered what happened next. The wounded soldier that Park had just finished treating was named Matt Collins. He had been shot in the stomach and should have been unconscious from blood loss. But when our soldier grabbed Dr. Park, Collins somehow found the strength to stand up. "He attacked your soldier?" He broke our squad leader's arm with his bare hands. Then he picked up Dr. Park and carried her to safety, while she continued to treat his wounds. He was bleeding, barely conscious, but he moved like he was perfectly healthy. Zilandra was quiet for a moment. "How is that possible?" We asked our medical teams that same question after the battle. They said it should have been impossible. The human had lost too much blood to remain conscious, let alone fight. But somehow his brain had overridden his body's limitations. Vexthal remembered watching Collins carry Dr. Park across the room while blood poured from his wounds. The human had moved with mechanical precision, as if pain and injury were just minor inconveniences. That was when we realized we were not fighting normal soldiers. We were fighting something that did not follow the rules of biology or military logic. What happened next? We called for reinforcements and tried to secure the building room by room. But every room was the same story. Wounded humans who should have been helpless were fighting like they were perfectly healthy. They had turned mining tools into weapons, set up booby traps using industrial equipment, and created defensive positions using their own bodies as shields. How many casualties did you take? In the first hour, we lost 30 soldiers to 23 wounded humans. Our commander was getting frantic radio calls asking how the operation was going so badly. Vexthul could still hear the sounds of that battle, the screaming of injured HFY soldiers, the cold laughter of humans who had nothing left to lose, and the constant sound of improvised weapons firing. The worst part was the human engineer, Kate Wilson. She had been injured in an explosion and was missing her left arm, but she had rigged the entire building with traps using the mining equipment. What kind of traps? She had turned the mining facility's automated systems into weapons. Conveyor belts that would suddenly start moving and carry our soldiers into crushing machines. Elevator shafts that would drop suddenly when someone stepped on them. Water pipes that would burst and flood rooms with scalding liquid. She did all that with one arm. Wilson had been working for 3 days straight, using her teeth to hold wires while her remaining hand connected circuits. She had turned the entire building into a machine designed to kill anyone who entered it. Vexthul finished his drink and immediately ordered another. The alcohol was helping him tell these stories, but it was not making the memories any easier to bear. By the third hour, our commander realized we were going to lose the battle unless we changed tactics. He ordered us to use heavy weapons to collapse parts of the building. Did that work? The humans had expected that. They had prepared for it. When the building started to collapse, they used the destruction to their advantage. Falling beams became cover, broken pipes became weapons, collapsed walls became escape routes. They escaped? Most of them. Dr. Park and her patients disappeared through maintenance tunnels that Kate Wilson had prepared. They took their wounded with them and left us holding an empty building full of traps. Zilandra stared at her recording device. 23 wounded humans defeated 200 HFY soldiers? We captured the building, but we lost 67 soldiers doing it. The humans had achieved their goal of buying time for their wounded to heal and escape. From a military perspective, they had won. What happened to the humans who escaped? They rejoined other human units and continued fighting. Dr. Park went on to save hundreds more human lives during the war. Sergeant Collins became a decorated hero. Kate Wilson designed defensive systems that protected human colonies for years after the war ended. Vexthul looked around the cantina, but the most disturbing thing was what we found when we examined the building afterward. What did you find? Evidence that the humans had been preparing for our attack for weeks. They had stockpiled medical supplies, modified the building systems, and planned escape routes. But they had also prepared something else. What? They had written letters to their families. Every single wounded soldier had written goodbye messages, expecting to die in that building. They knew they probably would not survive, but they fought anyway because it would give other humans a better chance to live. Zilandra was quiet for a long time. They were willing to die for strangers? That is what we could not understand. HFY soldiers fight for territory, resources, or survival. These humans were fighting for people they had never met just because those people were also human. That does sound terrifying. Yes, but not for the reasons you might think. It is terrifying because it means every human is potentially willing to sacrifice everything for their species. You cannot negotiate with that kind of dedication. You cannot threaten someone who has already accepted death. Vexthul looked directly at Zilandra with all his eyes. But that story is not the most disturbing one. The fourth story is about what happens when humans work together perfectly. That is when they become truly unstoppable. There is more? Oh yes, the next story is about the Battle of the Asteroid Belt, where we learned that human chaos is actually a form of order that we could never understand. Vexthul's compound eyes grew distant as he prepared to tell the fourth story. The cantina had grown quieter as the evening wore on, but he seemed to barely notice the other patrons anymore. His focus was entirely on the memories that haunted him. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt, he said slowly. That was where we learned that our greatest strength could become our greatest weakness. Zilandra adjusted her position in the chair. What do you mean? The Kethvar have always dominated space warfare because of our hive mind. When our ships fight together, they move as one perfect organism. Every captain knows exactly what every other captain is thinking. There is no confusion, no miscommunication, no wasted movement. Vexthul gestured with two of his arms. Imagine a flock of birds that flies in perfect formation. But the birds are warships with massive weapons. That is how Kethvar fleets operate. We had never lost a major space battle, but the humans were different. We thought human ships would be chaotic and easy to defeat. How could individual captains, each making their own decisions, possibly coordinate as well as our hive mind? It seemed impossible. Vexthul ordered another drink, his fifth or sixth of the evening. The alcohol was making his memories sharper instead of duller, as if the pain helped him remember the details. The battle happened near the asteroid mining stations in the Kepler system. We brought 300 ships, our largest fleet of the war. The humans had only 97 vessels, many of them smaller than our cruisers. Those are terrible odds for the humans. That is what we thought. Our Admiral Kexithera was so confident that she allowed me to observe the battle from the command ship. She wanted junior officers to see how easily human ships could be destroyed. Vexthul could still remember standing on the bridge of the flagship, watching the human fleet approach through the asteroid field. The ships had looked so small and fragile compared to the massive Kethvar vessels. Admiral Kexithera ordered our fleet into standard battle formation. 300 ships moving in perfect coordination, like a giant spear aimed at the human fleet. It was beautiful to watch. Every ship knew exactly where it was supposed to be. What did the humans do? Nothing that made sense. Their ships scattered in all directions, seemingly without any plan. Some flew directly at our fleet. Others moved sideways through the asteroids, and a few even flew backward away from the battle. Our admiral laughed and said the humans were panicking. Zilandra frowned. But they were not panicking. No, they were doing something we had never seen before. Each human captain was making independent decisions based on their own analysis of the battlefield. But somehow all those individual decisions were creating a pattern we could not predict. Vexthul remembered the moment when Admiral Kexithera stopped laughing. It was when the first wave of human ships hit their formation from 6 different directions simultaneously. The lead human ship was commanded by Alex Stone. Instead of attacking our flagship, he targeted our communication relay vessels. While we were trying to figure out why he was ignoring the main battle, his ship destroyed 3 relay stations. Why was that important? Without the relay stations, our hive mind connection became weaker. Ships on the edges of our formation started to lose coordination with the center. For the first time in our military history, Kethvar ships were not moving in perfect synchronization. That was their plan. It was part of their plan, but we did not realize that until later. While Alex Stone was attacking our communications, a human captain named Nina Rodriguez was leading her destroyer group through the asteroid field. Vexthul could still see Rodriguez's ships, weaving between the space rocks like they were dancing. No Kethvar pilot would have attempted such dangerous maneuvers, but the humans made it look effortless. Rodriguez's ships used the asteroids as cover and weapons. They would hide behind a rock, fire missiles at our fleet, then disappear behind another asteroid before we could return fire. But that was not the clever part. What was the clever part? While they were hiding and attacking, they were also pushing asteroids toward our formation. Small pushes, barely noticeable, but enough to change the trajectory of massive rocks. Vexthul remembered watching those asteroids drift slowly toward the Kethvar fleet. At first, it had seemed like random space debris, but then the pattern became clear. By the time we realized what was happening, we had dozens of asteroids drifting into our formation. Our ships had to break formation to avoid collisions. Our perfect coordination was falling apart. The humans had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon? Yes, but that was still not the most impressive part. While Stone was attacking our communications and Rodriguez was moving asteroids, a human pilot named Dan Foster was leading a squadron of small fighters directly into the heart of our fleet. That sounds like suicide. We thought so too. Foster's fighters were tiny compared to our cruisers. Our gunners should have destroyed them easily. But the fighters moved like nothing we had ever seen before. Vexthul gestured with all 4 arms, trying to show the impossible flight patterns he had witnessed. They flew like a flock of birds, but not the kind of flock our hive mind creates. Human flocks are different. Each pilot made their own decisions, but somehow they all worked together perfectly. How is that possible? We asked our scientists that same question after the battle. They studied recordings of the fighter attack for months. What they discovered changed how we think about coordination and teamwork. Vexthul paused to take another drink. Human brains evolved to work in small groups where everyone contributes different skills. When humans coordinate, they are not copying each other like our hive mind does. Instead, each human does something unique that supports what the others are doing. Like musicians in a band. Exactly. Each musician plays different notes, but together they create harmony. Foster's fighters were like that. Each pilot flew a different pattern, but all the patterns worked together to confuse our targeting systems. Thul could still remember watching those human fighters weave through the Kethvar fleet like they were performing an elaborate dance. Every time the gunners tried to target one fighter, 3 others would appear from unexpected angles. The fighters were not just avoiding our weapons. They were herding our ships into positions where the asteroids that Rodriguez had set in motion would cause maximum damage. They planned all of this in advance? That is what was so terrifying. They could not have planned it in advance because the battlefield was constantly changing. But somehow all the human captains were adapting their individual plans to support each other without direct communication. How do you coordinate without communication? Human intuition. Each captain was predicting what the other captains would do, based on their understanding of human psychology. They were thinking like other humans, so they could anticipate each other's actions. Vexthul remembered the moment when Admiral Kexuthara realized that the Kethvar fleet was being outmaneuvered by an enemy that seemed to read their minds. By the middle of the battle, our perfect formation had become a liability. Our ships were clustered together, making them easy targets for the asteroids and fighter attacks. But our hive mind made it difficult to break formation quickly. You were trapped by your own coordination? Yes. When every ship has to wait for orders from the central command, the fleet cannot adapt quickly to changing conditions. The humans were changing their tactics every few minutes, but it took us much longer to respond. What happened next? The human fleet began its final attack phase. All their individual actions suddenly came together in a coordinated assault that hit us from every direction at once. Stone's ships attacked from above, Rodriguez's destroyers emerged from the asteroid field, and Foster's fighters struck our command ships. Vexthul's voice became very quiet. In 30 minutes, the humans destroyed or disabled over half of our fleet. We had started the battle with 3 times as many ships, but we were forced to retreat. The humans won? Completely. But the most disturbing part came during the retreat. As our surviving ships fled the battlefield, the human fleet did not pursue us. Instead, they immediately began rescue operations to save Kethvar crew members from damaged ships. Zilandra looked surprised. They saved your people? Human rescue ships risked their own safety to pull Kethvar sailors from burning vessels. They provided medical care to our wounded and returned our survivors to neutral space stations. They fought us like demons, then treated us like honored guests. That does not make sense. That is what we thought. How can a species be so ruthless in battle, but so compassionate afterward? Our military leaders spent months trying to understand human psychology. Vexthul finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. But I have one more story to tell. The last story is the most disturbing of all, because it is about what happened when the humans decided to stop fighting. They surrendered? No, they did something much worse. They forgave us. Zilandra felt a chill. Forgave you? The final story is about the end of the war, when we learned that human mercy is more terrifying than human violence. Are you ready to hear how the war really ended? Vexthul sat in silence for several minutes, staring at his empty glass. The cantina around them had grown much quieter as the night progressed. Most of the other patrons had left, and only a few scattered groups remained at distant tables. Zilandra waited patiently, sensing that this final story would be the most important one. The end of the war, Vexthul said finally. That is when I learned that humans are capable of something more terrifying than any weapon they had shown us in battle. What could be more terrifying than what you have already described? Forgiveness. Vexthul signaled for another drink, his movements slower now after the long evening of alcohol and painful memories. After the Battle of the Asteroid Belt, our high command knew the war was lost. We had thrown our best fleets against the humans and been defeated every time. Our people were demoralized. Our resources were running low, and our allies were beginning to question our military competence. So you decided to surrender? Our leaders wanted to negotiate a conditional surrender, something that would allow us to keep some dignity, some territory, some hope for the future. We expected the humans to demand tribute, territory, and probably hostages to ensure our good behavior. Zilandra adjusted her recording device. That seems reasonable after losing a war. We sent messages through neutral channels asking for a meeting to discuss surrender terms. The humans agreed immediately, which surprised us. Most species would have made us wait, forced us to beg, or demanded preliminary concessions. Vexthul remembered the tension in the high command when the human response arrived. Everyone had expected harsh demands or humiliating conditions for even beginning peace talks. The humans said they would send a single ship to our homeworld to discuss terms. One ship with a small diplomatic team. No escort, no weapons, no show of force. Just one woman named Carol Price and a handful of assistants. That seems almost insulting. Did your leaders think it was a trick? We thought everything was a trick by then. How could the humans be so confident that they would send an undefended ship into the heart of our territory? Some of our military leaders wanted to capture the ship and use the diplomats as bargaining chips. Did they try? No, because something happened that none of us expected. When Ambassador Price's ship approached our homeworld, it was not alone. Vexthul paused to take a sip of his fresh drink. The ship was accompanied by a convoy of human vessels, but they were not warships. They were cargo ships filled with medical supplies, food, and construction equipment. Why would they bring supplies to enemy territory? That is what we asked ourselves. Our intelligence teams worked frantically to understand what the humans were planning. Were the supplies poisoned? Did they contain hidden weapons? Was this some kind of biological warfare? What did your tests show? The supplies were exactly what they appeared to be. High-quality medical equipment, nutritious food, and advanced construction materials. No weapons, no poison, no hidden surveillance devices. Just supplies that our people desperately needed. Vexthul could still remember the confusion in the war room when those test results came back. For the first time in months, the Kethvar High Command had no idea what their enemy was planning. Ambassador Price requested permission to land not at our capital, but at a refugee camp on the outskirts of the city. Thousands of our people had been displaced by the war, living in temporary shelters with inadequate food and medical care. She wanted to visit your refugees. She wanted to help them. Price and her team spent 3 days at the refugee camp, setting up medical clinics and distributing food. They worked alongside our doctors and engineers, teaching them how to use the human equipment. While you were still at war? Technically, yes. No peace treaty had been signed. Our people and the humans were still officially enemies, but Price treated the refugees like they were her own people. Vexthul remembered watching the news reports from the refugee camp. Human medics working side by side with Kethvar doctors, treating children who had been injured in bombing raids that those same humans might have conducted. On the 4th day, Price finally came to the capital for the formal negotiations. But she did not come alone. She brought General Tom Brooks, the human military commander who had been leading their war effort against us. The same general who had defeated your fleets? Yes, the man who had outmaneuvered our best tacticians and destroyed our most powerful ships. We expected him to be arrogant, threatening, eager to humiliate us in our defeat. Was he? General Brooks spent the first hour of negotiations apologizing for the destruction the war had caused. He expressed regret for every Kethvar life that had been lost, every ship that had been destroyed, every world that had been damaged. Zilandra looked confused. He apologized for winning? He apologized for the necessity of violence. Brooks explained that the humans had never wanted to fight us, but they could not allow us to conquer other species. He said the war had been a tragic misunderstanding that could have been avoided with better communication. Vexthul could still see General Brooks sitting across the negotiation table, his eyes showing genuine sadness as he talked about the cost of the war. There had been no triumph in his voice, no satisfaction at his victory. Then Ambassador Price presented the peace terms. We had prepared for harsh demands, reparations that would bankrupt our worlds, military restrictions that would leave us defenseless, territorial concessions that would destroy our pride. What did they actually demand? Nothing. Nothing. The humans asked for nothing. No tribute, no territory, no reparations, no restrictions on our military. They wanted only our agreement to stop attacking other species, and to join a galactic council where disputes could be resolved peacefully. Thul remembered the stunned silence in the negotiation room when those terms were presented. Several Kethvar officials had asked Price to repeat them, certain they had misunderstood something. Our chief negotiator asked if there were hidden conditions or secret clauses. Price said there were none. The humans genuinely wanted nothing from us except peace. Your leaders must have been suspicious, deeply suspicious. We asked for time to consider the terms, expecting it to be some kind of elaborate trap. During the recess, our intelligence teams analyzed every word of the treaty, looking for ways the humans could use it against us. Did they find any traps? The only unusual clause was an offer of ongoing assistance. The humans volunteered to help us rebuild damaged infrastructure, provide medical aid to war refugees, and share non-military technology that could improve life on our worlds. They offered to help rebuild what they had destroyed? Yes, and they followed through on that offer. Even before the peace treaty was signed, human engineering teams were already working to repair the orbital stations that had been damaged in the fighting. Vexthul finished his drink and did not order another. The alcohol was no longer helping him tell these stories. But the most disturbing moment came at the end of the negotiations. What happened? General Brooks asked to meet privately with our military leaders. He wanted to apologize personally to the officers who had fought against him. One by one, he met with our commanders and expressed regret for the losses their units had suffered. How did your officers react? Most of them were too shocked to respond. Here was the enemy general who had defeated them, treating them with more respect than their own superiors sometimes showed. Some of our officers began to cry. Others just stared at him in confusion. Why was that so disturbing? Because it showed us something about humans that we had never understood. They can fight with absolute ruthlessness when necessary, but they take no pleasure in causing suffering. Every human death, even enemy deaths, weighs on their conscience. Vexthul looked around the cantina. We thought we understood warfare. You fight until one side is defeated, then the winner takes what they want from the loser. That is how every other species in the galaxy approaches conflict. But humans are different. Humans fight to achieve specific goals, not to dominate or humiliate their enemies. Once those goals are achieved, they stop fighting and try to help everyone, heal from the damage that was caused. That does sound terrifying in its own way. Is terrifying because it means you cannot predict human behavior using normal logic. A species that shows mercy to its enemies cannot be threatened, bribed, or intimidated in conventional ways. Zilandra was quiet for a moment. What happened after the peace treaty was signed? Exactly what the humans promised. They helped us rebuild, shared their technology, and treated us like honored allies instead of defeated enemies. Within 5 years, our relationship with humanity became one of the strongest partnerships in the galaxy. So the war had a happy ending? For most people, yes. But not for soldiers like me who had seen what humans are capable of. We know that human kindness comes with a price. But what price? The knowledge that if we ever threaten innocent people again, those same kind, forgiving humans will become the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy. Their mercy is conditional on our good behavior. Vexthul stood up slowly, his movements careful after the long evening of drinking. That is why these stories are so important. Young people like